and will technology save us?
Thank you very much for that kind introduction, Hilary. I'm off mute. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
I guess I'm going to carry on because I can't see any thumbs up, but I hope that you can see mine. Thumbs up? Okay, fantastic. We will get going. So, good afternoon, everybody. I understand that this morning was absolutely fantastic, so I will do my best. My name is Anand Vengalekar. I'm very flattered that Hilary has asked me to answer the question that gives her the most anxiety, so I will do my best to make sure that I don't add to it. My background, as she described, is in technology and technology innovation and technology branding. I'm very fortunate to have worked for all of these companies. I'm British, but I live in Dubai. Dubai has gone through an amazing transformation over the last 20 years. I might add, however, that I live in the part of Dubai that looks a little bit more like what you see on the left than what you see on the right. In terms of what kind of responsibilities I have, as was described, I'm a consultant with various organizations. My biggest responsibility today is working with the Dubai government on the branding of their sustainability policies for global impact. And when it comes to the kinds of things that are pertinent to everyone in the room, these are the kinds of brands that I've worked with or that I've done innovation training. The one I'm most pleased with is the CEO of the Michelin Guide a few years ago asked me to redesign their business model and their brand positioning. Okay, so that's me. When Hilary asked me to deal with this question, which is, can technology save us? I sort of reflected over the last couple of months with all of the technology projects that I've done for the Sonys and the Samsungs of this world. And I thought, what is the first thing that I want to say? And this is what I have chosen. Frankly, technology is a pain. Okay, all of you chose F&B and hospitality for reasons that are probably nothing to do with technology. And on a daily basis, you get a knock on the door from agencies who say to you, you know what you need is CRM, or what you need is the right analytics. And all of a sudden you spend your entire day expected to be a technologist instead of somebody who's focusing on the reasons why you got into your career. And then to add insult to injury, you go home and you have teenagers who roll their eyes at you because you're still worried about YouTube and Instagram and all these wonderful things, and they've already moved on to TikTok and God knows how many other platforms. And with all your hard work, with everything that you actually do in hospitality and F&B, sometimes it feels as if all you've really done is taken a paper menu and added problems to it. If you spilt drinks on a paper menu, well, you just get another paper menu. Now you've got to deal with cracked screens and recharging and uploads and all of these other things. So if I've chosen my first slide very carefully because it's not surprising that technology gives us so much anxiety. This, however, is nothing new. So I could go back all the way to the Industrial Revolution, but let's talk about recent technology. When the first internet sites were developed, they were actually called brochureware because all companies did was take their brochures and put them online. And a more pertinent example, which I will come on to in more detail, is, does anyone in the room remember Kodak? So Kodak was a massive company present all over the world. They were the people who provided you with the film to take pictures. And when the digital revolution started, they were delighted. They actually led the way with digital cameras and things because their assumption was that people would then use the internet to order prints and order mugs and order calendars and all these other goodies. Then came Facebook. Now, what was interesting about Facebook in this world dominated by Kodak is Facebook did not offer prints. If you uploaded your pictures to Facebook, they actually minimized the resolution so you could see it. And there were no calendars, no mugs, there was nothing like that. But Facebook had one insight that we're going to build on. Facebook realized that what was important about the photography was not the physical product, it was the emotion that it generated, the value of the emotion. And Kodak was looking at new technologies and merely, like any restaurant that's trying to take a paper menu and put it onto an iPad, merely trying to take old ways of doing things and trying to put them into the new technology. And I could give you dozens of examples, and indeed that's what I do when I start working with any client, which is to change the dogma of thinking. Because if you don't change the dogma of thinking, there are numerous examples out there of dominant countries, dominant cities dominant companies that fell by the wayside because they did not adopt to the new ways of doing things, as opposed to merely trying to propose the old way of doing things. So my first lesson is this. From now on, any technology that you use in F&B and hospitality must add emotive value. Now, this word emotive is very, very useful. Emotion and motivation, emotive. Emotive value is something that generates emotions in the people that you're interacting with. If the technology does not add emotive value, and this was the insight from Facebook, then essentially all you're really doing is creating better efficiencies. Yes, you must have better efficiencies. I'm not suggesting you shouldn't. But if you're not adding value and you're adding cost, then all you have is an iPad menu. Okay, so let's leave technology behind a little bit. What I want to do is describe some lessons from zero technology. Now, I'm based in Dubai. The reason I chose to live in Dubai is because Emirates Airlines and Etihad fly everywhere. Well, they did fly everywhere. And I want to show you pictures from my very last trip. So this was in September 2019. I had spent the previous 9 months on various AI and IoT projects in China. I was traveling like mad. And I decided, you know what, I've had enough of technology. I'm going to go zero technology. And I went to stay at something called the Nananzi Temple, which was built in 1291. It was one of the first Zen temples. Every morning, I would wake up and I would take a stroll through a Zen garden and more Zen gardens. And needless to say, it was very gratifying to have no technology. And because I was one of the earliest risers, instead of being surrounded by tourists, I could sit in a tea ceremony room and I would be bought a cup of green matcha. I would then meditate and I would come back to where I was staying, which was a 400-year-old inn. I would get into my kimono for the day. Sorry, you're not going to see any pictures of me in it. And I was looked after by the 4th generation of family who were running this inn, this very lovely lady. She would then bring me my hot towel and my cup. And needless to say, for the 2 weeks I was there, every single meal I sat on the floor next to a koi pond, enjoying traditional Japanese food, and then returned once again to my room. Now, let's do a little thought experiment. While I was there, if I'd asked myself, can I enjoy Estonian food here, what would I have done? Now, yes, it's minimal technology, but of course they have Wi-Fi and they have air conditioning. So what do? I go to Google, and because of my because of my work now with all of you, because of my interest, I type in, where can I find Estonian food? And to my amazement...
You're making me blush.
Sorry, that was my Siri saying, you're making me blush. I'm not so sure why. I'm going to throw my phone away. So to my amazement, yes, there is an Estonian Japanese Food Appreciation Society. Once a year, they get together and they enjoy Estonian food. Now, what's the lesson here? What's interesting is that I didn't click on a banner. I didn't get promoted to. It was something that was interesting to me. It was interesting to me, and therefore I used technology in order to find out something more about it. And we're going to be building on that. This is the second insight. Let's compare that to Japanese food in Estonia. If you do a simple search of Japanese food that's available in the capital city, just like any other capital city in the world, you have almost a dozen options. And wherever you go in the world, it's a little bit extraordinary, if you think about it, that this cuisine, which I love, most of us enjoy, is so ubiquitous. You can literally find it everywhere. Now, I love the cuisine, but let's face it, it's very different from any other cuisine. So it kind of begs the question, how is it that this nation on the most eastern part of the world has developed this cuisine, F&B, which you can now get everywhere? How did it happen? And you can imagine it wasn't an accident. In 1868, the Japanese had something called the Meiji Restoration. They put the emperor back on the throne, and they decided, you know what, we're going to find out about what's the best in the world. And when we find out the best in the world, we're going to take the best of us out there as well. Before the Meiji Restoration, for literally almost 1,000 years, if any Japanese person even spoke to a foreigner, they were put to death. That's how isolated the kingdom was. Now, if that sounds familiar, it was actually made into a movie with Tom Cruise called The Last Samurai, which I highly recommend. Anyway, getting back to our story. When they restored the Meiji emperor to the throne, they went out into the world, and the first thing they saw was the British Crystal Palace. So this was a World Expo in London, and they decided, okay, we need to participate in the next one. The next one they participated in was the Paris Expo, and this is when the Eiffel Tower was built. Now, this was in 1889. 35 countries participated, which was unheard of, and there were 32 million visitors out of a country population of 40 million. So you can just imagine the impact that this fair and what everyone that was in the fair had. They had things like the latest technology in this. This was called the Pavilion of Machines, and all of the countries wanted to show what their best technology actually was. You can imagine the impact this made on the Japanese. And so what they decided to do was in 1910, they approached the British government. Now, remember what 1910, well, not remember, excuse me. 1910, the British Empire was the largest empire the world had ever seen. So the Japanese decided, if we want to be world players, we've got to do something with the UK. They created an exhibition in the centre of London. It was called the Japanese-British Exhibition, where they literally built a Japanese village and and town. They brought in villagers, they brought in everything to do with Japanese culture, so that the British people in the capital city could see what it was like to be Japanese. It amazes me that only a few years after Queen Victoria's death, British people were actually eating sushi as if it was completely normal. And this proactive approach to taking Japanese culture, to taking Japanese F&B out into the world is something that the Japanese did for half a century, proactively. And that's why today, in every capital city in the world, we enjoy sushi. So, lesson number 2. If you are not out there, you are nowhere. Now, for centuries, this meant that you have to have a physical presence abroad. But as the story that I described of me wondering, can I get Estonian food in Japan shows, now it can be digital, and therefore it's universal. But the story I described to you still meant something to me. So the presence isn't about promotion. It isn't about banner ads. It is coming up still with emotive value. All right, so we've spoken about countries, and I described to you what Japan did. Let's now talk about individuals and get back to those pesky teenagers. There is a reason why everybody is rushing towards more efficiencies. And the reason can be demonstrated by this graph. Now, I highly recommend that you keep up with this graph. The team that actually put it together, they do it by country, I believe. They definitely do it by region, and they do it annually. And it's called What's Going On in the Internet Minute. And as you can see, the statistics are unbelievable. In 60 seconds, it's quite phenomenal what happens on the internet. The reason I recommend that you keep up with it is it just gives you a snapshot of the kind of platforms and kinds of technology that people are using. I want to build on that, because if we're not talking about efficiencies, then we want to talk about emotive value, so the emotions that people get from it, it's important that we go a little bit deeper and then see how technology can save us, how it can help us. So have a look at this picture. Both pictures are taken in the same spot. So this is this is the St. Peter's Square in the Vatican during the election of the Pope. All of these people are devout in their religion. All of these people are waiting for an announcement who the next Pope is going to be. And I'll ask you a simple question, which is, who is more religious? Now, a gut reaction, a quick reaction would be, well, it's the people on the left, because they're not using technology. All these other people are on their phones. But that's actually not the point. This is in 2013, almost a decade ago now. The technology is becoming a significant part of what is possibly the most personal and potent part of being a human being, your beliefs and your religions. So it is no exaggeration to say that digital is not something separate now. It's not something optional. It is literally becoming an integrated part of what it means to be human. It is a complete fusion. There is no way for me to overstate this, even though on our own emotional level, we kind of feel uncomfortable with it. For us, the idea of being a human being, the idea of being distinct from machines is so important to us that we kind of imagine that the human experience is independent of the machine experience, even though since the Industrial Revolution, these two things have been combined. Now they are completely fused, even though we make jokes about it. Okay, so all of us in the room, we spend time on our phones. Some of you, if any of these slides have been useful, have been taking pictures of the screen. From the moment we wake up to the moment we go to sleep, we're looking at our WhatsApp and we're checking what's happening with business, etc., etc. But even then, there's a part of us that thinks, oh, well, I'm not like the influencers. I'm not like those people who are constantly taking pictures. Even though, as I said, every significant moment that happens in our lives, weddings, birthdays, special occasions, we are capturing them and putting them online. But there's something interesting going on that I would like to highlight, and it's illustrated by this picture. I use the photograph in the Vatican to show that the most personal things in our lives, the things which are most important to us, are now captured digitally. A digital is a part of it. What's going on is actually even more subtle. So at first glance, you think, look at these silly influencers. They're queuing up in order to show themselves as this traveling wanderer who finds these wide open spaces to find themselves. Okay, and they're willing to queue up. So how is it that these people are not walking away and saying, oh, well, I thought this place was isolated. Actually, there's a queue, so it's not real. I'm going to leave. They don't. The question is why? Now, if you accept the hypothesis that being a human means there's a combination between your physical life and your digital life, and these two things are being fused, it means that you have to capture, everything you capture has to represent the best of you as well. None of us post a bad selfie, none of us take a bad picture and say, oh, well, that's okay, it's not real, it's just digital. On the contrary, it is becoming more and more important to us that what we show in our digital life absolutely represents the best of us. Therefore, lesson number 3, from now on, the human's ideal life is a combination of the physical experience and the digital experience. So let's go back to what I was saying. I was saying, you know what, I zero technology. I left my technology behind. Look at me, I was looking at Zen gardens and I was drinking some green tea while looking at the gardens and meditating in front of them. And then I was going home and sitting in front of my kimono, sitting in my kimono. Absolute rubbish, okay? Absolute rubbish. What did I do? I took my phone with me everywhere I went. I took a photograph of everything and shared it immediately. If the photograph wasn't Zen-like enough, I took another photo to make sure that I was presenting the hotel, my F&B experience, the temple, everything that I touched, which is relevant to all of you in the room. I wanted to show it in the best light. And because of the speed of the internet, the efficiency of it, I was sending out the best images of all of these F&B and hospitality experiences, the best images to my entire network around the world like that. Therefore, for technology to save us, your primary goal is to add emotive value into people's experiences and let their technology work for you. Their technology, and they will then represent you as true ambassadors. Why? Because they want to represent their idealized lives to their entire world. As new technologies appear, and they will, okay, your teenagers are going to get into augmented reality, all sorts of things. To a certain extent, it doesn't matter as long as you continue to add emotive experiences. What this means is that every single step of what would be an F&B professional journey, from check-in to rooms to tableware to buffets, all of these things that you do, regardless at price point, the price point is not important, you have to give people reasons that they're going to capture it because it represents their life, because you gave them emotions. You gave them emotions. Now, there's lots of statistics you can find online about this. This is just from a quick search. I found the idea of Estonian cuisine in Japan interesting? It was interesting to me. So what is interesting to people at large? It's not what you think. It's not the influencers. It's not the branded promotions. It's not the banner ads. It's the lives of people that you know, your peers, and people that you respect. And that enables you, that motivates you, therefore, to go and then perhaps try it. Now, don't misunderstand me. Of course, celebrities have an impact, etc., etc. Of course they do. But at the end of the day, it's because you feel you have an emotional connection with them, as opposed to somebody who is just living a blingy life. So before I answer the question, let me just summarize what I've said so far. Essentially, there are three lessons which I'd like to bring to this forum. The first one is that efficiencies through technology is not good enough. You're spending money on taking a paper iPad digitally. You're not creating emotive value, and your priority is to provide emotive value. Secondly, if you get your emotive value right, you will get your message out there. The reason I went back in history was that the entire nation of Japan realized that after 1,000 years of isolation, they needed to be physically out there. You don't need to be physical anymore. You've got to be digital, but you still have to be out there. You still have to be an option. And thirdly, all of your customers' ideal lives is a combination of physical and digital. We may joke about it. We may say, that's not really me. But in terms of proactive planning, in terms of the way that you work with your management team, in the way that you train your team to look after customers, they've got to be completely aware that not only are they offering the excellence of an F&B experience hospitality, but everything they do has to be geared towards digital capture and therefore storytelling. All right, so with that foundation, in the last few minutes, I'm hopefully going to be able to help you with this question. So rather than can technology save us, I would like to say that how can technology save us? Right, so step number one. First of all, in order for this storytelling to occur, and in order for this to go digital, and in order for you to provide emotive value, you've got to choose, I'm using that word carefully, choose what is unique about the region, your product, and then design for emotive experiences. You've got to choose. Now, gone are the days where you could just show a nice picture and say, hey, come to visit us, we're great. On the contrary, the places that are succeeding, the regions that are succeeding, the cities that are pushing ahead, are the ones that are actually deciding, you know what, this is something that we're going to hang our promotions on. This is what we're going to decide is our brand. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples. The first one is, those of you who are working in the Ministry of Culture or Tourism or the Tourism Board, please, please, please have a look at the example of Colombia. Colombia went from being the drug capital of the world, where you had to take special insurance to go visit, to a place that is on people's destination list. And it was a proactive strategy that they did top down. They did it from the government, ministry, tourism board, to hoteliers, to airlines. Everybody worked on it together. What they decided to do was, the emerging trend at the time was eco-tourism. And they decided, you know what, this is what we are going to do as a whole. Please have a look at the case studies. There's a lot of published information. I was very lucky to see a presentation given by the head of the tourism board as to how they developed the strategy. Really worth looking into. Second example. In 2004, I was based in Copenhagen. I was doing strategy and branding consultancy there. I was asked by Rene of Noma, I'm sure you all know Noma, to help with a presentation that they were doing to introduce this idea of new Nordic cuisine to other restaurants, to other forums, etc. So I worked on the presentation with them. What was interesting is what happened next. In 2005, the Nordic Council got together, the agriculture and food ministers listened to the chefs who had already met together in 2004. So in 2004, decided we're not going to compete with each other. We're going to come out with ways that we can do Nordic food as a community. And they decided to adopt it. You can find all of the information on the new Nordic food program. And what is really cool is in 2006, they actually got 3 million euros secured from the EU to take this even further. With the principles I've described, which is taking every single step of the customer journey and asking, how can I add emotive value? You can imagine, therefore, that new Nordic cuisine is absolutely perfect for that. Now, maybe they weren't consciously thinking of it that way, but the reason I provide that example is, and the Colombian example, it is up to you as an entire community to choose where you're going to go and then decide as a community as to how you're going to develop it. Now, some of you may be saying, well, hang on a second, isn't that a little bit artificial compared to actually kind of the real places? Okay, so if you go to Paris, it's kind of real, isn't it? They've got this history, it goes back 100 years, gastronomy and all of that. But actually, I would propose to you that this is being, in a sense, a blank piece of paper is an advantage. I described to you that I've worked with the Michelin guide. Of course, I knew some of the inspectors. Very, very interesting discussions as to where French gastronomy is going. French gastronomy is actually protected by UNESCO. So UNESCO, says this building needs to be protected or this archaeological site. To my astonishment, the gastronomic meal of the French is protected by UNESCO. But therein lies their challenge, which is so many people have commented, industry professionals, tourism people, chefs themselves, which is French gastronomy, is French tourism trapped in the past? Because if you're a world traveler, if you're trying to live your idealized life, if you're trying to capture things digitally, if you're trying to share it with your community around the world, are you really going to keep doing the same thing? So, if you then have chosen the direction you want to go in, the other advantage, of course, you have is that you can now do it much quicker. It took the Japanese about half a century to establish themselves and their F&B and their culture onto the world stage. I live in Dubai. Dubai, I work with the government. I know about their policies. I'm working on them now to take their policies onto the global stage. No one would have guessed 20 years ago or so that Dubai would become a global tourist destination. It was a choice, a deliberate choice by the Dubai government to actually make themselves a tourist destination. And if you think about what Dubai was like in those days, it would have seemed nonsensical. And the Colombian example and the Nordic example, those are literally less than 5 years. And I would suggest to you that once you make your choice, the digital revolution that is driving efficiencies will actually allow you to do it much quicker than the examples I've provided. That's step one. Step two, and then we'll conclude, is once you've actually decided what this concept is or what this theme is to employ these unique experiences and stories to maximize being out there by every single visitor's technology. If we answer the question, will technology save us? The idea that we have to invest in technology or we have to buy the computers, I'd like to suggest a different mindset. I'd like to suggest a mindset that you plan for technology, but the technology is your customers. They're the ones who do the investment, and your job is to work with them so every single visitor's technology is helping to, quote, save you. Okay, last two slides. What have I described to you? This is my summary. First one, I've said that technology must add emotive value. Please research that expression and what it means. Efficiencies are not enough. Secondly, emotive value for customers is experiences that add value, uniqueness to their ideal life. I say again, the ideal life is now a fusion between your physical experience and your digital experience. By enabling the digital storytelling by your customers, not just promotional generic advertising, which, let's face it, none of us have the budget for, will allow you to be out there in the same way as all of the examples that I've described. And last point, technology enables all of this for global viral storytelling. Now, I'm in design thinking. All of the projects that I've described to you, all of them begin with design thinking. Design thinking is, in a sense, the tool by which I enable all of the projects I've described. And in design thinking, you have something called questions for innovation. So these are the questions that I would leave you with for you to discuss amongst your teams, amongst your peers. Question number one, how can you organize an all-inclusive forum to choose a world-unique theme? What fascinates me about the Nordic cuisine, it was top-down. Although it began with a group of chefs, nevertheless, they worked from minister level all the way down to individual restaurant and hotel. Secondly, what are the extra ways that you're going to create emotive value? Once you decide on a theme, you've got to think about every single customer step and ask yourself, what will I do in that step to actually add this emotion? Number 3, how can you stop competing with each other and actually work as a community to maximize synergy? That was the first step they did in the Nordic Food Program, which is all of the restaurants said, we're going to work together. And lastly, once all the travelers go home, once they go away with all their digital stories, how can they be encouraged to continue to share those stories long after their visit? Now, I've described that the tool is design thinking. Hilary and I've already spoken about this, which is the examples that I've shown you and the case studies that we worked on. We hope that when COVID is over, that we'll be able to actually do some hands-on workshops for all of you, where we'll bring these examples as case studies and we can introduce the tools. But for now, I'd like to pause there. This is my email. If anyone has any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you very much.